Observation 1 is a framework. The resolution, as I just learned, is that the United States Supreme Court should rule that searches of students, persons, or property without a warrant in schools violates the Fourth Amendment. Number 2 is this is a policy because we really like policy. The number 3 is it's net benefits because we don't know how else to weigh this. And number 4 is that our argument is that this is our advocacy. That means that if their critique alternative is going to preempt this or be competitive with this in the real world, then we would argue that that would preclude this sort of action in the real world, so we get the way impacts. The next point is that speaker points are an arbitrary construct, and they're absolutely problematic because they stratify people with arbitrary judge interventions on what they consider a reasonable range. Therefore, we should seek to deconstruct the system, and the only way to do that is to give all 4 speakers in the round 30 speaker points. Observation 2 is the background. The number 1 is that in 1985, the Supreme Court ruled in New Jersey v. the TLO that searches of students was not a violation of the Fourth Amendment, and that school administrators could quite simply go nuts. Plan? It's over there. Oh, okay. Plus the plan.
Sure.
Okay. We have copies of it somewhere. The United States Supreme Court, through normal means, will overrule its ruling in New Jersey v. the TLO, ruling warrantless searches of students in school grounds on school grounds a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Do you guys have any questions about acronyms, anything?
Can you read it one more time?
You have a copy.
Oh.
Everybody has a copy, actually. So no. Solvency? Through normal means? Yeah. Any questions on acronyms? We don't want to plan flaw. Moving on. Solvency.
Find in the bag.
The plan, fiat is a test of, test should, not can. So our argument here is that, yeah, we know this isn't like necessarily how the court works, but this is like the only reasonable case. But anyway, the number 2 is that we don't have to provide an existing case to grant writ for, because that would be like asking us to provide an existing bill for any time we invoke the U.S. federal government through fiat. Anyway, advantage 1 is school violence. The uniqueness. The first point is that right now in the status quo, students believe they're basically in a perfect panopticon. They feel perfectly protected by the actions that administrators have taken to preclude the sorts of school violence. The little a is that they believe this means the government is always watching. Administrators as extensions of the government. The little b that means that they feel that weapons and things like that and tools of violence are always going to be uniquely excluded from a school environment. They believe it's absolutely impossible. The number 2 here is that an increase in this leads to an increase in violence. The little a is that bullies are acting with impunity. Our argument here is that when the weaker individuals in school have no recourse against these, when the bullies believe that the weaker individuals have no recourse against their bullying, they're always going to do it to their heart's content. Our argument here is that many administrators here feel that this is significantly a part of being in school, so they're not going to act on bullying, especially when their focus is on these warrantless searches to preclude acts of greater violence. The little b here is that our argument here is furthermore schools overlook a lot of these minor quote-unquote acts of bullying because they're understaffed. The link here is that the plan takes schools' abilities to search away. The internal link here is that the first is that it's a perceived risk of school shooting goes up in the eyes of these bullies, in the eyes of these administrators. The number 2 is that Americans empirically rely on low chances of probability. This is the same reason that people are more likely to buy a lottery ticket than they are to deposit money into an IRA or some kind of like reasonable savings vessel. They're always going to bank on this low probability. Number 3 here is that the searchers aren't doing a great job of checking in reality, but they're perceptually doing so. People believe that they're able to act in impunity. Therefore, the impacts. Our argument here is that in a world of plan, this impunity goes away. The first impact scenario is bullying. The little a under here is that I don't think we have to really go into analysis on this at a debate tournament, but bullying is pretty shitty. Our argument here is that it creates all sorts of psychological trauma from which people often never recover. Our argument here is that they are devalued in their peer environment, and when you are devalued in your peer environment, there is no way that you can cope reasonably with a new environment of peers or perhaps superiors. This hamstrings your ability to participate in the real world, but furthermore, the little b here is that it hamstrings your ability to get a good education. Our argument here is that when you know that you're getting the crap kicked out of you at the flagpole at 3 o'clock, it is really hard to concentrate on that calculus test. The little c here is that empirically and just intuitively, this can lead to a maximum extent of psychological trauma, which is, of course, suicide. But our argument here is that because the animosity is built up against the perpetrators of this exclusion, this social exclusion, that this suicide is often in the guise of suicide and murders. Our argument here is that the root of school shootings is this bullying, and the reason that bullying is happening is because people can't, because people think that they can act with impunity. The number 2 is school shootings. The little A under this is that, again, our argument is that these are largely the result of bullying. The little B here is that plan makes for a reminder of the fact that there are consequences. This is going to get massive publicity because people are going to be upset about how unsafe it is in schools. Our argument here is that the rhetoric surrounding this change will be uniquely a message to these individuals that would perpetrate this worst kind of bullying, and it would tell them that, look, there's a risk right now. All your administrators and all your parents agree that there will be violence as a result of your social or actually in many cases physical violence, so you probably shouldn't do that. Advantage to a self-agency. The uniqueness. The first is that in the status quo, students perceive the government to be the big brother, not just at Air Force, but everywhere else. The little A is that there are a lot of examples of wiretap, what amounts to wiretapping in terms of spying on kids on Facebook and other electronic mediums. The little B is a specific example where the student had a school-issued laptop that had tracking software that allowed them to turn on the camera remotely whenever they wanted. They waited till the student was outside of school grounds at home and turned on the camera and spied on this student, all under the guise of protecting. Our argument here is that in a world of a plan, this sort of action would be precluded, but the little C here is quite simply bag searches are totally permissible in the status quo because of the holdings in New Jersey VTLO. The two here is that students this creates a dependency on the government. The little A is that they can do whatever they want with impunity. They can act the fool online. And they're always protected because the school's #1 burden is to preclude violence. This means that girls are able to alienate other girls because their body types aren't in line with what they feel is the social ideal. This means boys are able to alienate other boys because of their sexual practices or what have you, their personality, their hobbies. Our argument here is that this is the sort of environment that begets these helicopter parents, where students are never allowed to act on their own. They're never forced to deal with the consequences of their actions against peers. The link is that our plan makes them responsible for the actions. The internal link is that this is a direct increase in personal responsibility because people are culpable. They no longer have the system to protect them at every step. So our argument here is that this is the key to self-agency. The impacts. Our argument here is that the detachment from the responsibility of your actions in a pure environment that happens in the schools, in the status quo, is the internal link to violence because you have no need to identify with those against whom you are committing violence because the state says that it is okay because they're more concerned and have the means to be more concerned about the violence that happens with guns and things like that. Our argument is that in a world post-plan, they will have to look at the root of the problem, which is the social inequity that results from bullying.